part 2 on developing your reputation as a thought leader. Let's jump back in. Randall, to my mind, all of your 10 tests, stand together in harmony, each building on, stand alone. But to my mind, two of them, there may pose a conflict. So
Okay.
help me tease this out. One of your tests is the economic test, how much you are making and how much you can monetize your thought leadership. And the other test is the activity test. How busy is your calendar? How much activity are you doing? How many engagements do you have? The leader that speaks and writes for free or for less will certainly be busier than the one that has a higher price tag.
So I guess it's the chicken. Why did the chicken cross the road, right? Or what came first, the chicken or the egg? There's all kinds of, I don't know, chicken analogies, okay? But which came first and why? Because the economic test isn't how much money you're making. It's really more, what do people value for the time, for your time. It's not like $20 an hour versus $50 an hour or $10 an hour. Okay, but for a particular type of engagement, what would somebody be willing to pay for you as opposed to somebody else, right? What can you actually charge? Certainly as a speaker, when I started my career, when people started to ask me to speak many years ago, I was a lot cheaper than I'm right now, and there's a lot of people that are actually more expensive than me for whatever reason as well. The activity level, the activity test speaks to you're right, how much stuff you're doing, if you will, and some of it is free and some of it's paid. So, if you go to my my Randall Craig LinkedIn page, you can actually go and subscribe to my tip sheet there. You get it via LinkedIn, as it's a newsletter. It's very good. But okay, that's from our perspective. It's taste the chocolate before you buy the box, right? It's kind of like a sampling kind of program. So it takes some time to actually do that. But once again, over time, it demonstrates a very deep expertise, but it allows people to actually test you out. So some of those things are free. Other things, for example, if people want to go to Amazon, they can buy a book for like 20, $30, whatever it costs, right? That's a little bit more expensive. Somebody else can then say, well, gee, I think I little want more. They could spend a couple $100 on one of the courses at the Brain Trust Professional Institute website. Gee, somebody wants a little bit more, they can they can do a whole bunch of other things, either coaching or having me speak or having us deliver the monthly CPD, etc. And so all those things are at different price points and allows people to test drive some of the knowledge that you actually have. I don't see them as conflict, because every single time somebody tries something, that's trial, that's a commitment for something, potential commitment for something more. Okay, or every commitment's a trial for something more, I should say. So if we think about, the conflict between the two of them, no, it's chicken or egg, right? People don't care about me or you, Rania. People care about how you or I can solve their problems. And people want proof points. It's not enough, I think, today to say, look at my resume. This is what I've done in the past. I think people want to know what you think today. So unless you're providing that, which is the part of where the activity test sort of comes in, and where some of the free content, if you will, comes in, I think that's I think those are the proof points. And so I think for most thought leaders, think about it. If you're working at one of the large consulting firms, large accounting firms, large law firms, large engineering firms, large fill in the blank firm, you probably have some dedicated resources, a marketing department, etc., that can help on some of the content development, right? They may interview you about a particular question, much the way you're interviewing me right now, Rania. And then after that, guess what? There's a video and there's all kinds of little social things that they can put out, and there might be some articles, maybe an op-ed in the newspaper, and gee, there might be a white paper, a whole bunch of different things coming out from that one interview. So you've got all these people around you sort of helping amplify the core knowledge. if you're working at a boutique firm, or you're an entrepreneur who recognizes that thought leadership can be a differentiator for your small enterprise, that's fine. So you got to do some of it yourself, but you do want to figure out how to be more efficient at it. Shameless plug for our super efficient writing and editing course or our thought leadership course. But you want to be more efficient at it, right? So I think it's also a question of how do you divide and conquer as your organization matures and grows and you have more arms and legs that can help you, right? What can be outsourced? Once again, I don't think everything can be outsourced to ChatGPT. I don't think that's original thinking, right? My initials are RMC. I think it's better to do a chat RMC or a chat Rania Francoeur as opposed to as opposed to trying to get a machine to do your work, right? It doesn't have your experience, so you've got to find a way to showcase it. And that's what'll drive, thank you very much, the economic test. And interestingly, the better you do on the economics, the more flexibility you have on the activity, right? It's a virtuous circle. It's a virtuous circle. It's not a conflict.
I have some thoughts that wouldn't be, tests, but maybe some velocity here. Our society has moved from a culture of character to a culture of personality. All things being equal, we do see the thoughts of big personalities more predominantly featured than those of more demure voices, perhaps. Do you think that aspiring thought leaders need to use this reality in their thought leadership strategy? Is quality content enough to stand out?
Um, I think it's one of the requirements, necessary but not sufficient, I think is the term people would use. But I'd like to take a step back and you didn't use the word when you're describing it, but I think this is what you meant. Are thought leaders influencers? Are influencers thought leaders? There's all kinds of celebrities who are influencers that seem to command huge audiences, etc. And they've been able to monetize their thought leadership by by promoting health and beauty or health and fashion or promoting destinations or and that's not what I would call a thought leader in the business sense, although they've got good businesses. This is them figuring out how to take advantage of their celebrity or take advantage of a viral video or a particular craze that they were able to latch onto somehow, etc. And when that craze goes away, if they haven't sort of figured out how to get lots of social media followers and get sponsorships and everything, and influencer marketing is very, very important as part of a B2C and more often B2B sort of marketing plan. But I think that and there are some clients who may say, well, gee, if you've got a lot of celebrity, then yeah, we want you, right? We want you. We want but the question of what does that celebrity mean? And sort of where you're going to spend your time, right? And how you're, at every interaction, trust either goes up or it goes down. So for example, if somebody decided to pay me to sell new eyeglasses or something like that, and people know me as somebody who can help organizations grow their business and reduce complexity and all those other things, that's incongruent, right? And so nobody would ever want me to do that. I probably would never accept it because that would reduce trust with my particular audience. So I think yeah, if you're able to build a big enough following, famously, the beginning of President's Choice with one of the grocery stores here in Canada, Loblaw, started with Dave Nichols and being a pitchman on TV for a whole bunch of unique products that they were developing, right? But what happened after Dave Nichols actually left, right? Steve Jobs famously was a cult of personality around him. And there's a great concern that Apple as a company would go down once Steve Jobs, left, or, obviously he sadly passed away of cancer. but gee, whatever, the company's 10 times bigger, right? So you've got to be careful with respect to saying, okay, the strategy that I'm going to sort of follow as a somebody who's got deep expertise, is truly an expert in an area. The strategy I'm going to do is try and make it a cult of personality. I don't think so, right? You can try it. You might be it might amplify some of the things that you're doing, but you need the core before it gets amplified. Okay, and I don't think it's just a question of content. It's a question of making sure that you're in the places where your target audience is. So, as a professional speaker, guess what? In the audience, there may be people who might want to buy some of our other services. That's an example of not content, but performance, if you will, right? Same thing with respect to say your volunteer activities. Are there people who can sort of see you in action, right? In a certain sense, all of your content is just a promise of what the potential performance actually is. And so if you perform, you're chair of a not-for-profit, for example, right? Or you're involved in something in the community, whatever it happens to be, and people say, okay, so this person's actually real, right? This is what helps cement, if you will, and it's not just one thing. I think we had in that thought leadership course, I think it's 13 or 15 different ways to monetize it, okay, by demonstrating and sort of crossing that divide. So, I think that, if you're a strong personality and and you're able to get some degree of celebrity, it's helpful. But, we don't want to be known as an empty bag, right? Lights are on, but nobody's home, right? We have to make sure that there's always somebody home, and there's evidence of that. And if you think about this podcast, for example, we've covered a whole ton of different business growth and organization related topics, right? And it would be impossible to do that kind of thing if it was just a question of say me being a celebrity, which I'm not, right? So
Not
that
yet.
not yet, okay, not yet, right? But that's an amplifier. It's not the core, right? It's not the core. So it's a good question.
I appreciate all of these considerations that you've laid before us when we talk about personality. And Randall, of course, the core has to be there and the mind has to be there. And it's not about celebrity, but Randall, when I look at your peers, right? When I look at the other Speaker Hall of Famers, it's undeniable there is a lot of personality to go around. There is a lot of vibrant, flamboyant, opinionated, emotional people. Um, do you think that's something someone needs to think about, like to develop that thought leader persona? Like people like this kind of character.
Yeah, and then if I look at all the fellow CMCs, the FCMCs that are around, they all seem to be very, very thoughtful and not big personalities, but they're very, very deep in their particular areas, and they've been able to make a difference
And they're
too.
on the stage and they're best-selling authors.
No, no,
Let's
no.
talk about those people. That's what I'm
So
talking person
I
on the stage, the person being invited to the media interview.
yeah.
I'm watching the news. I'm clear that the personalities are what is sought after.
I I remember the very first media interview I did. And at that particular point I thought, you know what? One of my first books years and years ago, it did fairly well, and I thought to myself, I should probably get some media training, right? I spent a lot of money on getting media training and understanding kind of how to be very good. And the first time that I did a media interview, I was not very good. But I was smart enough to say to the journalist afterwards, listen, I don't do media interviews very often. Is there anything that you could suggest that would be helpful? And they made some suggestions, and I listened and rinse and repeat that a whole bunch of times and everything. One of the things I've learned is that um, vanilla doesn't sell. If you don't have opinions that are backed up with logic and experience and not made up stuff, if you will. If you don't have opinions, people are not going to ask you for your opinions, right? And so there's a difference between people just spouting nonsense and I think most people can tell when they're being sold to, right? And I think there's most people can tell, when they have that media interview, for example, gee, that's something I hadn't thought of. That's very insightful. Okay. And same thing right now, here we are, we're doing this. If you can imagine this podcast, it's think about this as like the longest media interview you'll ever have. And here we are, you're pushing and you're asking me questions and you're you're debating, etc. And you're putting me on the spot, right? So what gives you the right to do that? Obviously, your mind is thinking. What gives me the right to respond, right? Presumably my mind is thinking as well. So yeah, I think that there is, I would not say the cult of personality is, if you look at people like, for example, Richard Branson, brilliant business entrepreneur, right? And there's a personality sort of aura around him. There's quite a few other sort of titans of industry, for example, the head of all the tech platforms, the Elon Musks of the world, whatever his politics are aside. And so, yeah, with though at that particular level, but most people are not at that level, right? They may aspire to do good by their clients and grow their business, etc. But they're not Richard Branson or Elon Musk or the late Steve Jobs, etc. But we can learn something from them. And as you pointed out, that having an opinion, having a little bit of a personality, I remember earlier in my management consulting career, somebody said, we're looking to hire some more people. They said, we should make sure that we can do the airplane test. They said, oh, what's the airplane test? And essentially is this: if you were to sit next to this person on a long airplane, 6-hour flight, across the pond, would it be an interesting experience, or would you be bored out of your mind because they just didn't have anything to say? They had no personality, right? They couldn't carry on a conversation. You didn't learn something from that interaction. You didn't, it wasn't possible to start a real relationship. They were just like a walking computer, right? And so that stuck with me. And I think that in a certain sense, most people who are thought leaders, they would do very well on the airplane test. And I would also suggest that most people who truly are thought leaders are probably doing some incredibly interesting things outside of their professional sphere. And they probably realized that if you do some amazing things outside, it sometimes informs how you do things inside.
I'm happy you mentioned that, Randall. The next vector I'd like to lay before you for examination is exactly that idea of personal experiences and unique experiences. And when I say personal, I don't mean in your personal life. I mean unique to you professional experiences. So for your own content, when you write, when you speak, when you're in the media, you do not talk about your personal experiences. And again, personal doesn't mean in your home, it means your unique experiences professionally. To my mind, when I think of someone having a unique point of view, it is their own unique experiences that would lend itself readily to creating that unique point of view. Do you want to speak to how it is that you've, separated that from your own content?
So so there's a great debate. Okay, on one, and I've sort of put myself on one side, and the other side of the argument is also there's just as much validity in it. It's just that I'm a little less comfortable doing it. So if you read my white papers or tip sheets or any of that kind of stuff, they tend to be very focused on a particular topic, right? And much like a business book is. Some business books, some people's blog posts and articles and everything are very much a personal reflection. I guess in the world of media, the question is, does the reporter make themselves part of the story or not? Is something that most, professional news organizations say, no, the reporter is observing, if you will, right? And reporting on that. So I guess I took a little bit of that in terms of where I actually did, my thing. Honestly, people don't care about me if they're searching for a particular problem. And if I spend some of my time saying, and in this case this happened, in this case this happened, and here's a very interesting story about this and that, it might make it a little bit more interesting. It might make it a lot longer, but it also is one anecdote that might have formed my opinions or thoughts or experience or knowledge on that particular topic. And anyone can have one or two opinions or experiences. And that one or two experience doesn't sort of generalize into, okay, this is the expertise. So for me, I realized that it's kind of I'm missing something. So if you read my tip sheets, they're very, very specific. It'll take you less than 5 minutes to get a very, very cool topic. Okay, my white papers are a little deeper. It'll take a little bit longer, maybe half an hour or so, an hour to get through it all. But that's very simple, right? If I were to talk about a whole bunch of my personal experiences, it would be a lot longer. And I miss something because they don't get a chance to interact with Randall, the person, as much as Randall, the advisor or the consultant or the coach or the speaker or the expert, or maybe in their mind the thought leader, right? And so what I typically do is I keep those personal experiences for when I'm coaching. I keep some of those for when I'm on a stage when I'm speaking, right? Just so that it becomes a lot more interesting and a lot more relatable, etc. I know a lot of people have taken the opposite stage, which it's all about them and their experiences. I woke up yesterday and this is what came to mind. 3 years ago, this is what happened, and that got me thinking about this and that, and then tell the story about what happened 3 years ago. And it's very entertaining. They're a bit longer form. For me, stylistically, it just doesn't work, but there's nothing wrong with it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. I think that when I'm meeting a prospective client, those kinds of things always come up. Because a client will say, "Can you tell me a time when? Okay, have you been in this kind of situation before? Gee, how did you get that insight? And out the stories come, right? And out the examples come, right? And it's okay, I got it. Okay, there's the proof point on what you said or why you said it, etc. So it's also maybe a question of the medium as well. So
I really like that distinction you made there, and where you do bring up your stories more naturally for you. Although I don't see, when I say personal, unique to you, professional experiences, that is interacting with Randall, the person, as you said, although there is a lot to be said about the value of, that angle of things. But Randall, you don't even use case studies. There is
so
so much we know that we learn through stories. Our human brain learns through stories, and we learn about ourselves as leaders through stories. That's why case studies are universally done. They're in pitch decks everywhere.
yeah, and maybe that's something we should put on our agenda of coming up with and case studies. What I will say is this. Um, the nature of the advisory work, the coaching, the advisory work that I do is something that is exceptionally, exceptionally confidential. So for example, you know, uh, um, an entrepreneur is looking to sell the business in 3 years. So what can we do to actually, get it ready? Okay. Gee, people have, my number one and number two person have left. Okay. I got to figure this one out. Okay. Gee, our systems and processes are really not good. And we're skating on very thin ice, and it's very embarrassing. It's, gee, we had whatever it is, but usually they're things that our clients don't want to talk about, and would be horrified if it was put in a public in a public forum. So that's kind of my um fear, if you will, that if we did a case study, and of course the client would have to agree to it and agree to all the words and everything like that. I think what might be or what has been a good substitute is this. Here's all the referenceable clients. Look on my LinkedIn, on my professional LinkedIn profile. Look at all those people who seem to say some incredibly, incredibly, fine things about their performance, right? Of whatever that particular task is, whether it be training, whether it be coaching, whether it be advisory work, whether it be speaking or whatever. And so when it gets to the point of a client saying, I think that we want to work with you at the Brain Trust, but wouldn't mind speaking to some of your other clients, the answer is wonderful. Here's a whole bunch. Okay, here's a whole bunch. And at that particular time, it becomes a lot easier for that reference to say what they want in terms of the impact that we made and what we did, etc. It's just very, very difficult from a confidentiality perspective for any of the advisory work or any of the coaching work. We can say, generically, what we've done, but very often, most organizations, if they could figure out how to solve their problems, they wouldn't need to sort of knock on our door, right? We had a client not too long ago who had a history of doing terrible, and ineffective offsite retreats, right? And so you and I, Rania, we planned the retreats the way we did, and we delivered the retreat and facilitated and did training and all the other kinds of things. And a month or so after that, the client is still saying what a dramatic difference it's made to the actual team, and to the organization, and it's completely changed the way they're looking at offsites, right? So maybe that'll be a good case study. Okay, I don't know, right? Maybe that'll be a good case study. So we'll see. I think it's the reference conversations at that particular point.
We talked about how we learn through stories. And why is it that way? We learn through stories because we register our understanding for ourselves through context. We are contextual learners. That means that we really do need to compare and contrast anything to assess its value. Circling back to your 10 tests, and when one of your clients or a member of your audience, hears these tests or takes them home and tries to make sense of them without real data to compare what their peers are doing, how do we properly assess the tests?
So, for those who are watching us who play golf, maybe you might understand what I'm about to say. So you're there with your threesome or your foursome, and everybody sort of plays. And the question is, are you competing against everybody else? Well, there's a handicapping system that makes that possible, or are you competing against yourself? Are you trying to do better than you were in the past, or are you trying to do better than everybody else? Right? Obviously, it's nice to win, and if you're going to put a couple dollars on it to get a few bucks, etc. But listen, I think the issue of what are the particular objective measures, the fancy title test. Okay, so you're a CEO of a 1,000-person organization. You probably have a better do better on that test than somebody who's the CEO of a 100-person or a 10-person organization, right? So some of those things can be very objectively said. Okay, here's what the differences are. Longevity, I think it's very easy to say if you know that who your benchmarks are. Okay, they've been involved for this long, I've been involved in that long. It doesn't matter though. What matters is that the more time you spend doing something, the better you're going to be in actually doing it. Same thing with respect to social follower. Okay, how many followers do you have? How active are they compared to others who are your benchmarks? And I will say this, even though these 10, and if we add the other 3 that we talked about, that you brought up, these 13 tests, some of the tests don't matter to you, right? So for me, the sheer number of social followers I have is a little less important. For some people, it's they don't care if they've got 500,000 people on their email list versus 100 people on their email list. If it's the right 100 people, it's far more important than the wrong 500,000 people, right? So I'm not saying that each of them are equal and each one are equal for you, but I would say that it's not a question of comparing and you to somebody else. It's a question of how do you move along the spectrum for each one of these, for the ones that are important to you, right? And if for the ones that aren't important to you, once you've got the ones that are important sort of licked, then the question is, let's relook at some of these other ones. Maybe that might be the one thing that can make a difference now, when there's before it might not have.
Randall, you are not just an advocate for, creating that thought leadership, but even more so that regular drip. You would even recommend, a weekly content, weekly blog, weekly podcast. Keep your name out there, right? If the goal becomes a schedule, doesn't that risk diluting the quality of the content? If the goal is not just to, share the eureka moments. On that question, we're going to pause here. This part 2 on our discussions around thought leadership and how to assess one's thought leadership. We'll pick up with more Q&A in part 3. And if anything we talked about so far resonates with you, if you're interested in developing your own thought leadership, do reach out. We'd be happy to have a conversation and share resources. You can email us at info@randallcraig.com or book a call at www.randallcraig.net/30 and see you back for part 3.